Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive, this time into the world of American versus British English.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, and we're going to go beyond just the basic, the stereotypical stuff that you always hear about.
Right.
And really kind of dig into like the subtle, the sneaky little differences that even trip up like advanced English speakers.
I know, because I'm one of them.
Yeah, like even, people who are like, very, very fluent in both. But there's still some little things that are like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So we've got 15 words and phrases
Okay.
to guide you through these sort of tricky transatlantic conversations. And trust me, you will be surprised by some of these things.
I'm ready to be surprised.
Okay, good. So what I think is interesting is that it's not just like vocabulary swaps. It's like it kind of gives you a peek into the history and the culture and even the humor of both countries.
Absolutely. Yeah. They really do reflect those deep cultural differences and sometimes even values.
Yeah, like almost like a window into like a different mindset.
Exactly.
So let's jump right in with our first word. It's one that's kind of been popping up a lot lately in both American and British English, but with a slightly different vibe. And that word is
Bespoke.
bespoke.
Yeah. You've probably seen it like in marketing materials and stuff, but how does it actually differ across the pond?
Well, in both American and British English, it basically means the same thing, which is custom made, made for a particular customer.
Right.
But in the U.S., at least, it still kind of has that connotation of something really exclusive associated with like luxury goods and services.
So like a bespoke suit or like
a bespoke suit, a bespoke car.
Right, like a Rolls Royce or something?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So it still signals like luxury prestige and really that attention to detail.
It's like it's become a marketing word almost.
It has.
Yeah.
It has. And it's becoming more common.
Right.
But it still has that sense of like, this is special.
Yeah. This is not just off the rack. This is something really unique. Whereas in British English, it's much more commonplace.
Interesting.
You can use it for anything that's customized, whether it's a wedding dress, kitchen cabinets, you name it. Our source even gives the example. She ordered a bespoke wedding dress from a designer in London.
Wow. Yeah. So it doesn't have that luxury kind of vibe to it.
Not so much. It's just like, I had this made for me.
Yeah.
Just for me.
Interesting. Okay. So the same word can have these subtle like shades of meaning depending on, where you are in the world.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. I like that.
It's fascinating, and it makes you realize how much context matters when you're communicating.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit to a word that I think often trips people up. And this is like the classic Q versus line dilemma.
Ah, yes, the great transatlantic Q debate.
Right.
One of those fundamental differences that just seems so simple, but they reveal so much about those cultural perspectives.
Right.
So in the U.S., you stand in line, which to me kind of implies a more individualistic approach, like everyone's just focused on their own thing, getting it done. Whereas in the U.K., you queue.
Right.
And that suggests orderliness.
Right.
Shared social etiquette, like we're all in this together. We're all going to wait patiently for our turn.
And it's almost like a cultural institution in Britain, the concept of queuing.
Absolutely. It is. It's deeply ingrained in British society. You queue at the bus stop, you queue at the grocery store.
Right.
You even queue at the pub.
Yeah, you better queue up.
Yeah, and there's an unspoken understanding that you wait your turn. It's just part of their social fabric.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, is that reflected in other aspects of British life? Is that that whole like sense of order and politeness and
for sure.
Yeah. Very interesting. Okay, let's move on to a word that describes a feeling we all know too well, but express it differently. Utter exhaustion. So in American English, we might say exhausted, but our British friends have a wonderfully evocative word for this, and that word is knackered.
Knackered. Oh, yeah. I love that word.
It's a good one, isn't it?
It is. It's so descriptive. It goes beyond just being tired.
Yeah.
It really conveys that sense of being completely drained, worn out.
Right, like you've just hit a wall.
You've hit a wall, you're done. Yeah. And while Americans might use exhausted in a similar way, knackered has this playfulness to it. Like almost like they're poking fun at their own fatigue.
Right.
Which is very British.
Yeah, it's a good one. And our source uses the example, I'm absolutely knackered after working a double shift.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think perfectly captures that.
It does.
But I'm curious, do you think that playful tone is like a way of downplaying the severity of it?
Possibly. Yeah, it could be like a coping mechanism.
Right.
Like make light of a difficult situation, which, as we've said, is very British.
Yeah, very British for sure. Okay, ready for our next word.
Hit me.
Okay. So this is a word that is a bit of a chameleon. It changes its meaning depending on which side of the pond you're on, and that word is fancy. Fancy, yeah, so in American English, fancy typically means, something elaborate.
Right.
Or upscale, like a fancy dinner or a fancy hotel.
Fancy restaurant. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But in British English, it takes on a whole other meaning.
It does. It has like a secret double life.
Right.
It means to want or to like something. So you might ask a British friend, do you fancy a cuppa?
Do you fancy a cuppa?
Which means, would you like a cup of tea?
Right.
So simple question, but a very different meaning.
Yeah, I'd say yes to that any day of the week.
Exactly.
A cuppa. Okay, on to our next word, another one that showcases the British love for expressive language. This one is chuffed. Chuffed.
Love it.
It's a good one.
Yep.
A good one.
Yep.
It expresses a feeling of great delight or satisfaction.
Yeah, it goes beyond just being pleased.
Right.
It's like absolutely thrilled, over the moon, delighted.
So it's like pleased on steroids.
You could say that, yes, if your British friend says, I'm chuffed to bits about your new job, they're not just happy for you, they're ecstatic.
Yeah, they're like really, really happy for you.
Really, really happy.
Yeah. It's like, I love that it's such a specific word.
It is.
For that very specific emotion.
Yeah, it captures that feeling of pure joy.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about some seasonal vocabulary. When those leaves start changing color, and Americans call it fall.
Our British friends call it autumn.
Autumn. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always found it interesting how those different words evoke different images in my mind.
Right.
Fall feels more crisp
Yeah.
and dynamic, like the leaves are like actively falling.
Yeah.
Whereas autumn has a more mellow, kind of wistful feel to it.
More romantic, maybe.
Yeah. It's really interesting how these subtle differences in wording can like shape our perceptions of the world around us.
Absolutely. It really highlights how language can influence our thoughts and even our emotions.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's explore how Americans and Brits measure time.
Okay.
What do you got for me on this one?
Well, this is a fun one. In British English, they use the word fortnight to denote 2 weeks.
A fortnight.
Yeah. Whereas Americans would simply say 2 weeks.
Right.
Fortnight sounds a little old-fashioned.
Yeah, it does a little bit more literary almost.
Right.
Or historical.
Yeah.
But it's still quite common in British English.
I kind of like it.
Yeah, it's got a charm to it.
Yeah, like a little nod to a bygone era.
Absolutely.
It's cool. Okay. Let's talk about another area where we see these transatlantic differences, and that is taking a break from work or school.
Okay.
So, Americans go on vacation.
The British go on holiday.
Holiday. Right? Same concept, different word. But it's interesting, this distinction kind of highlights how language evolves. Both words, vacation and holiday, have Latin roots.
Right.
But they've kind of taken on slightly different meanings over time.
They've each gone on their own little linguistic journey.
Yeah.
Reflecting the cultural nuances of their respective countries.
Right. Like the evolution of language.
Exactly. Okay, now we're going to step into a potential minefield of misunderstanding. This is all about wardrobe essentials. What Americans call pants.
The British call trousers.
Trousers. But here's where things get really interesting.
Yes.
In British English, pants typically refer to underwear. So a simple statement like, I need new pants.
Could lead to some very awkward situations.
Oh my God.
If you're talking to someone from the UK.
Like, so you're in London, you're like, I need some new pants. And they're like,
you're looking at you like, what?
Oh.
Yeah. You want to buy new underwear right now?
Like,
so be careful with that one.
be very, very careful.
Stick with trousers if you want to avoid any awkwardness.
Okay, trousers. Got it. Speaking of potentially embarrassing mix-ups, our next word is one that I think Americans need to be extra careful with, and that word is rubber. Now, in British English, this is a simple word. It means an eraser. That thing you use to rub out pencil marks?
Right.
But in American English, rubber has a completely different meaning.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And it's not something we're going to discuss on this show, but...
we'll let your imagination run wild.
Yeah.
But suffice it to say, it's best to stick with eraser to avoid any red faces.
Yes, stick with eraser. Americans, be very, very careful.
Yes.
Our source really emphasizes this. They're like, warning.
Yeah.
Okay, shifting gears a little bit to places of healing, what we call in American English. A doctor's office in British English is often called a surgery.
A surgery?
A surgery. But here's where things can get a little tricky.
They can.
because in British English, surgery can also refer to the consultation hours at a doctor's office. So you might hear someone say, I'm going to the surgery at 9 a.m. for a checkup.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily mean they're having a medical procedure.
No, it just means they're going to see their doctor.
Right.
During their consultation time.
Got it.
So again, context is everything.
Yeah.
When it comes to language.
Right. Very, very true. Okay, let's move on to a mode of transportation that helps us conquer those tall buildings. Americans take the elevator.
The British hop in the lift.
The lift, two different words, same vertical journey.
Exactly.
And, this difference, I think, goes way back to the early days of these contraptions. Elevator, with its emphasis on lifting, kind of reflects that American focus on functionality.
Yeah.
Whereas lift, with the more simpler, elegant sound, might reflect a British appreciation for understated design.
It's a fascinating thought, isn't it?
It is like the words themselves.
Yeah.
Kind of give you a clue.
They do.
Okay, ready for another housing showdown?
I am.
Okay, in American English, we live in apartments.
Our British counterparts reside in flats.
The flats. So both words paint a picture of, like, a self-contained living space within a larger building.
Right, yeah.
But they do conjure up kind of different images.
They do, don't they?
Like apartment to me feels more modern and spacious.
Modern, spacious, maybe even a little bit luxurious.
Right.
Whereas a flat feels cozier, more intimate.
Right.
Maybe even a little bit quirky.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
So apartment might be like a sleek high-rise.
Exactly.
And a flat might be like, charming,
yeah,
older building with character.
A little more character, yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing how these words can carry such nuanced cultural baggage.
They do. It's fascinating.
It is. Okay, speaking of nuanced cultural baggage, let's talk about entertainment.
Okay.
So Americans go to the cinema to watch a movie.
In British English, they go to the cinema to see a film.
A film.
2 words.
Same cinematic experience, but again, they reflect a little bit of a different perspective.
Right.
Like movie emphasizes movement, action. The spectacle of it all.
The entertainment.
Yeah. Whereas film kind of highlights the artistry, the craft.
The medium itself.
Yeah. Like movie is more about the entertainment value.
Right.
And film is more like it's elevated to an art form.
Exactly. And that distinction really speaks volumes about how Americans and Brits approach cinema in general.
It really does. It's really interesting. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about food.
Okay.
When we're craving that restaurant meal,
Yeah.
but we don't feel like dining in,
Right.
Americans order takeout.
The British go for takeaway.
Takeaway. And here's where things can get a little tricky again, because in British English, takeaway can refer to both the food itself and the restaurant that provides it.
Yes.
So you might hear someone say, let's get Indian takeaway. And that could mean either ordering food or going to an Indian takeaway restaurant.
Exactly.
So again,
Context
is everything you got to pay attention
Absolutely.
to those subtle cues in British English to make sure you're on the same page.
Right.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive, from bespoke suits to knackered Brits. We've explored some really interesting differences between American and British English, uncovering these hidden layers of history, culture, and humor along the way. And I think it's been fascinating to see how those differences can sometimes lead to miscommunication.
Absolutely.
Or at least a little bit of confusion, but it also makes the learning process all the more interesting.
You've done an excellent job of not just identifying these differences, but also analyzing what they reveal about the two cultures.
Well, I've had a wonderful guide, but we're not done yet.
No, we are not.
There are still more linguistic gems to uncover.
Yes.
So buckle up. Get ready for part 2, where we delve into even more fascinating distinctions, including some surprising transatlantic twists on everyday words and phrases.
It's going to be good.
It's going to be good.
You won't want to miss it.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into the wonderfully quirky world of American versus British English.
And I think you'll find these next few examples particularly intriguing.
Oh, good.
We're going to delve into some everyday words and phrases that take on surprisingly different meanings across the Atlantic.
Okay, hit me with those linguistic curveballs.
Yeah.
What's first on our list?
Let's start with something we all do every day walk in American English. We use the sidewalk to get from point A to point B.
But in British English, they stroll along the pavement.
Same concrete path, different terminology.
Right.
And this seemingly simple distinction actually reveals a lot about cultural perspectives in the U.S. The emphasis is on the side as if it's an addition to the road, almost an afterthought.
Right.
But in the UK, the pavement is the main focus, the designated space for pedestrians.
That's a really interesting observation. It makes you wonder if that difference in terminology reflects a broader difference in how pedestrians are viewed or treated in both countries.
It's definitely something to ponder. Okay, let's move on to something that's near and dear to all of us, food, specifically those sweet treats that bring us joy in American English. We indulge in cookies.
While our British friends savor biscuits.
Now, this is where things can get a bit tricky because what Americans call biscuits are more like what the British would call scones.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's a classic case of a transatlantic word swap.
And a potentially confusing one.
Uh-huh.
Especially if you're craving a chewy chocolate chip cookie and end up with a crumbly, buttery scone. Instead, talk about a culinary disappointment.
I know, right? A total letdown. Speaking of potential disappointments, let's move on to another food-related distinction that often causes confusion snacks when we're feeling peckish and want a quick bite. Americans reach for chips.
While the British opt for crisps.
And to make things even more interesting, what Americans call French fries, the British call chips.
That's a total chip swap.
It is, and one that can lead to some amusing misunderstandings, especially when ordering food at a restaurant.
Right. Imagine asking for chips in London, expecting a side of fries, only to be served a bag of what you'd call potato chips.
Exactly, or vice versa.
Oh, man.
It's a good reminder that even seemingly simple words can have very different meanings depending on where you are in the world.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's shift gears and talk about something a bit more practical transportation in American English. We fill up our cars with gas.
While in British English, they top up with petrol.
Same fuel, different terminology.
And this distinction is particularly important if you're ever driving in a foreign country and need to find a petrol station.
Right.
You don't want to end up stranded with an empty tank because you used the wrong word.
That would not be good.
No, not at all. Speaking of transportation, let's talk about those iconic red buses that grace the streets of London. In American English, we'd simply call them buses.
But in British English, they're often referred to as coaches.
Now, this is where things can get a bit confusing because in American English, a coach typically refers to a long-distance bus or a private bus used for tours or sporting events.
Right. Like a tour bus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you're in London and someone tells you to catch the coach, they're probably not talking about a luxury tour bus.
Right.
They simply mean to hop on the regular city bus.
Got it. It's all about context.
It is, and it's a reminder that even seemingly straightforward words can have multiple meanings depending on the region and situation.
Okay, let's move on to a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Books. When we finish reading a book, Americans typically return it to the library.
While in British English, they take it back to the library.
It's a subtle difference, but I find it fascinating because it highlights how even simple verbs can vary across regions.
And those subtle variations can sometimes reveal underlying cultural nuances. For instance, the American emphasis on returning might suggest a sense of ownership as if the book is being given back to its rightful place.
Right.
Whereas the British use of taking back might imply a more transactional approach, as if the book is simply being returned to its point of origin.
Like almost like we borrowed it and now we're taking it back.
Exactly. It's like those different verbs offer a glimpse into the unspoken rules and expectations surrounding books and libraries in both cultures.
That's really thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Okay, let's wrap up this segment with a distinction that's particularly relevant in today's digital age. When we want to find information online, Americans typically use Google to search.
While in British English, they often use Google to look something up.
Again, it's a subtle difference, but it reflects how language adapts to new technologies and cultural practices. Search feels more active and directed, like you're on a mission to find specific information.
Right.
While look something up feels more casual, like you're simply browsing for information or clarifying something you're curious about.
And that distinction might reflect a broader cultural difference in how Americans and Brits approach information gathering. It's fascinating food for thought.
It really is. Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground in this segment, from sidewalks and cookies to petrol and coaches. We've explored a wide range of American versus British English variations, uncovering hidden layers of cultural meaning and potential pitfalls for the unsuspecting traveler or language enthusiast.
You've done a fantastic job of not only highlighting these differences, but also prompting us to think critically about what they reveal about the two cultures and how they influence our communication.
Well, having you as my expert guide has made this journey both insightful and enjoyable. But our linguistic adventure isn't over yet, is it?
Not quite. We still have more fascinating distinctions to uncover in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, I'm ready. Bring on part 3.
Get ready for some even more intriguing and potentially confusing transatlantic twists on everyday words and phrases. Stay tuned.
All right, welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into American versus British English.
I feel like we've uncovered so many linguistic surprises already,
We have.
but I have a feeling there are still more gems waiting to be discovered.
I think so too. I think so too. So are you ready to wrap up this transatlantic adventure with a bang?
Absolutely. We've explored some fascinating vocabulary variations.
Yep.
But now let's delve into a few more examples that highlight those subtle but significant ways in which American and British English diverge, even in the simplest of actions.
Okay, bring it on. What linguistic mysteries are we unraveling in this final segment?
Well, let's start with something we all do when the temperature drops: bundle up.
Right.
In American English, we put on a sweater when we need an extra layer of warmth.
But in British English, they do in a jumper.
Jumper, same cozy garment, different name.
Right. And that difference in terminology might actually reflect a subtle difference in cultural attitudes toward clothing.
Possibly.
Like sweater emphasizes the practical purpose of the garment, keeping you warm when you sweat.
Right.
But jumper has a more playful, almost whimsical feel to it.
Yeah, like it's meant to make you feel light and bouncy.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that observation. It's amazing how even something as simple as a name for a piece of clothing can reveal these subtle cultural nuances.
It is fascinating, isn't it?
It is. Okay, let's move on to something that's sure to spark some friendly rivalry. The beloved game of soccer.
Oh, yes.
In American English, we call it soccer.
While our friends across the pond simply refer to it as football.
Football. Now, this is a classic example of a transatlantic word swap
It is.
that often leads to some good-natured teasing.
Absolutely. Especially during major sporting events like the World Cup.
Oh, yeah. I can just imagine the banter back and forth.
Oh, yeah.
You call it soccer, we call it football, but we all know who the real fans are.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, we're all united by our love of the game no matter what we call it.
Right.
It's a reminder that even when our words differ, we can still find common ground through shared passion.
Right. Very true. Okay. Speaking of common ground, let's tackle another difference that often trips people up: how we talk about time.
Okay.
So in American English, we might say, I have class this afternoon.
While a British person might say, I have class this evening.
And this is where things can get a little tricky because afternoon and evening don't always have the same boundaries in both varieties of English.
Right.
In general, Americans tend to use afternoon for a broader period of time, extending later into the day than what British English speakers might consider afternoon.
So it's almost like the American afternoon stretches further into the evening hours.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that can definitely lead to confusion if you're trying to schedule something with someone from the UK.
Definitely always best to clarify to avoid any scheduling mishaps.
Right. A good point. Okay, and speaking of potential mishaps, let's delve into the world of higher education, another area where American and British English use different terms for the same concept. So in American English, we attend college after high school.
While in British English, they go to university.
University, same concept, different terminology.
And this distinction can be important when navigating academic conversations or applying to institutions in different countries.
Right.
Imagine telling a British professor that you're applying to college when they're expecting you to say university.
Oops. Yeah, that could be a little awkward.
A little bit, yeah. So it's all about using the right lingo to fit in and avoid those awkward moments.
Right. Very true. Okay, ready for our final linguistic showdown?
I believe so.
All right. Let's explore how Americans and Brits express that feeling of being overwhelmed with work or commitments.
Okay.
In American English, we might say, I'm slammed.
While a British person might say, I'm snowed under.
Snowed under, both expressions convey that sense of being buried under a heavy workload. But they use different imagery to paint that picture.
They do.
I'm slammed. Kind of evokes a sense of sudden impact.
Yeah, like you've been hit with a ton of bricks all at once.
Right, exactly. Whereas snowed under suggests a more gradual accumulation, like you're slowly being buried beneath a growing pile of tasks.
And those subtle differences in imagery can actually reveal a lot about how Americans and Brits approach work and stress.
That's an interesting thought.
It is fascinating how even the simplest of phrases can offer a glimpse into those deeper cultural patterns.
It really is why we've really gone deep on this
Yeah,
journey.
we have.
From sweaters and football to afternoons in universities, we've explored so many fascinating nuances of American versus British English, uncovering these hidden layers of history, culture, and even psychology along the way.
I think it's been a truly enriching exploration.
I agree. I feel like I've gained a whole new level of understanding and appreciation for these two varieties of English.
Me too. It's been fascinating to see how language is more than just a tool for communication. It's a reflection of our cultural values, our historical experiences, and even our individual perspectives on the world.
It really is, and that's what makes the study of language so endlessly fascinating.
Absolutely.
There's always more to discover, more to learn, and more to appreciate.
Always.
So I hope our listeners have enjoyed this deep dive into the wonderfully weird world of American versus British English as much as we have.
I'm sure they have. And remember, the journey of linguistic discovery doesn't end here. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep celebrating the diversity and richness of language in all its forms.
That's great advice. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Ever wish you could just download a new language straight into your brain?
Haha, wouldn't that be amazing?
Seriously. But in the meantime, you sent over this mini lesson all about learning English words every single day.
Yeah.
And, squeezing it into just 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That was intriguing enough to make me want to hit download on this deep dive.
I love that. We're installing an upgrade, right?
Totally.
And honestly, 20 minutes, that feels doable even on the busiest day.
Yeah.
You know what really hooked me was how the mini lesson focuses on strategies that just fit into everyday life.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about cramming or anything. It's
Yeah.
more about finding ways to weave new words into what you're already doing.
Mm-hmm.
Take the first strategy, for example.
Okay.
Reading or listening to things you actually enjoy.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it sounds obvious,
It does.
but how often do we actually do that?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we get so caught up in textbooks and exercises
Yeah.
that we kind of forget about the power of just genuine interest.
Mm-hmm.
When you're actually hooked on a topic, learning new words just feels less like a chore.
Totally. It feels more like a natural part of the experience.
Right.
The mini lesson suggests choosing a short article,
Okay.
maybe 300, 500 words, on something you love.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that feels so much less intimidating than tackling War and Peace in English.
Oh, for sure.
What about things like podcasts or videos?
Oh, yeah.
Those work too.
Absolutely. Especially if you're someone who's more of an auditory learner,
Mhm.
podcasts and videos can be incredibly immersive.
Yeah.
And there's just such a huge variety out there that you're bound to find something that really aligns with what you're interested in.
Right.
And don't be afraid to use things like subtitles or transcripts,
Oh, yeah. Good time.
just to help you catch those new words.
Okay. So let's say we're cruising along, enjoying our favorite blog or podcast,
Mhm.
and bam, we hit a word we've never seen before. What's the next step?
Well, the mini lesson talks about keeping a vocabulary journal
Okay.
or using an app.
Got it. So is one of those better than the other?
It really just boils down to personal preference. I think some people really love that hands-on feeling of writing in a journal.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're creating your own personalized dictionary with definitions, sample sentences, maybe even little doodles or sketches.
Oh, that's so cool. Turning it into a creative project.
Yeah.
But what about apps? Do they offer anything that a journal can't?
Apps can be fantastic, especially when it comes to this thing called spaced repetition.
Spaced repetition.
Yeah, and this is where technology really shines.
Okay.
They'll actually remind you to review words
Oh, wow.
at specific intervals,
Okay.
which research shows is super effective for, moving information into your long-term memory.
Got it. So it's kind of like having a personal vocabulary trainer
Yes.
built into your phone. Speaking of taking detailed notes,
Yeah.
the mini lesson has this sample journal entry
Mm-hmm.
for the word intriguing.
Oh, yeah.
It's got a definition, an example sentence, even a synonym and an antonym.
Wow.
It's pretty thorough.
That level of detail might seem like overkill to some people,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's what helps to really cement the word in your mind.
Makes sense.
It's not just about recognizing the word, it's about really understanding,
Okay.
its nuances, its connections to other words,
Yeah.
and how to use it correctly.
Got it. I am all about making things fun, so this next strategy really caught my eye.
Oh, tell me about it.
It involves sticky notes,
Uh-huh.
and lots of them.
Haha. I love sticky notes.
So basically, you label everyday objects around your house
Okay.
with their English names.
Oh, I see.
I can already see myself sticking refrigerator on, well, my refrigerator.
It might seem a little silly at first, but think about it. Every time you go to grab a snack, you're getting a mini vocabulary lesson.
That's true.
That constant visual reinforcement can really help those words stick.
Right. Plus, if anyone asks, you can tell them you're conducting a very important linguistic experiment.
Exactly.
And here's another little digital twist the mini lesson suggests.
Okay.
Changing your phone's language settings to English.
Oh, that's smart.
Right.
It's such a simple hack, but it's brilliant. You're constantly interacting with your phone. So all those basic words like settings, messages, calendar, they just become ingrained in your mind through sheer repetition. It's like passive vocabulary training.
Okay, I have to admit, I've been guilty of this next one myself.
Oh.
Learning words in isolation.
Ah, yeah.
But the mini lesson stresses the importance of learning words in context. Why is that so crucial?
I think rote memorization might help you pass like a vocabulary quiz or something, but it doesn't necessarily lead to true understanding.
Okay.
When you encounter a word in context, in a sentence or a phrase,
Right.
you see how it interacts with other words. You know how its meaning shifts subtly depending on the surrounding language.
So it's like the difference between knowing the individual ingredients of a cake versus understanding how they all work together to create that final delicious result.
No, right. Exactly. The mini lesson even mentions this idea of collocations.
Collocations, so yeah.
Yeah, words that just tend to go together naturally.
Okay.
Like make a decision, or heavy rain, or take a break.
Got it.
And learning these kind of chunks of language can help you sound more fluent, more natural.
It's like learning the right dance steps.
Yes.
Instead of just flailing your arms around randomly on the dance floor.
Exactly.
Now, I know we're all about making language learning fun and engaging, but there's no escaping the need for consistency.
Right. And that's where that final strategy comes in.
Okay.
Practice and review consistently.
Got it. And this is where that spaced repetition we talked about earlier comes into play.
Yes, exactly. The mini lesson suggests reviewing new words, after one day, 3 days, a week, and so on.
Okay.
And this gradual spacing helps those words really sink in.
Right.
And become part of your long-term vocabulary.
It's like you're building a vocabulary muscle.
Yes.
You need to work it out regularly to see results.
You got it.
The mini lesson even breaks down a sample review schedule where you learn like 5 new words a day.
Okay.
And then review them at these specific intervals. It feels so much less overwhelming when you see it all laid out like that.
Absolutely. Even just like 10 or 15 minutes a day, whether it's reviewing flashcards, writing your vocabulary journal, or doing a quick self-quiz, it can make a huge difference over time. It's about finding those pockets of time in your day and turning them into vocabulary-boosting opportunities.
I love it. So we've covered some really solid strategies for learning new words.
We have.
But the mini lesson doesn't stop there.
It doesn't.
No. It also provides some practical activities to actually put those strategies into action.
Ooh, okay, I like this.
The first one's called a quick flash review.
Quick flash review, okay.
Which, as the name suggests, involves flashcards.
Makes sense.
I'm guessing most people are pretty familiar with the concept of flashcards, right?
Yeah, they're classic for a reason.
For sure.
But you know what? The mini lesson adds a fun little twist.
What's that?
A timer challenge.
Oh, cool.
So you set a timer for 1 minute and you try to get through as many flashcards as possible.
Okay.
It's a great way to add a little friendly competition to your review sessions,
Love it.
even if you're just competing against yourself.
Right. I love the idea of gamifying learning.
Me too.
It can really help keep things interesting
For sure.
and prevent those review sessions from becoming, monotonous.
Absolutely. Now, the next activity is where things get a little bit more interactive.
Okay.
It's the word of the day role play.
Ooh, this one sounds fun. So the idea is to choose a word of the day.
Right.
Why don't we use one we've mentioned already?
Okay. Yeah.
How about intriguing?
Intriguing. Perfect choice. Now we each need to come up with a short dialogue.
Okay.
Where we use intriguing naturally. At least twice.
Okay.
Imagine we're at a bookstore.
All right. Give me a sec to think. Okay, I got it. We're browsing the shelves, and I spot a book with a cover that just screams, "Read me."
Haha, I'm already hooked. What happens next?
I turn to you and say, "Wow, this new mystery novel looks so intriguing. I've heard great things about the author."
And I might reply with something like, I've been meaning to try something different. Tell me more about what makes it so intriguing.
See, it's all about finding ways to use the word in a context that feels, real and relatable.
Exactly.
The mini lesson encourages you, the listener, to come up with your own dialogues too.
It's such a fantastic way to practice using new vocabulary in a creative and engaging way. Now, the final activity is perhaps the easiest and most accessible of them all.
Okay.
Self-talk.
We all do it, right?
We do.
But now we have an excuse to do it in English.
Exactly. The idea is to simply narrate your actions throughout the day.
Okay.
I'm making breakfast, I'm walking to work, I'm answering emails.
Yeah.
The challenge is to try to sprinkle in at least one new word each day.
That's a good challenge.
Right.
It's such a low-pressure way to practice.
It is.
You're your own audience, so there's no fear of judgment.
Right. And over time, you'll be surprised at how naturally those new words start to flow.
That's awesome. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
We talked about key strategies, practical activities.
Mm-hmm.
But before we move on, I want to highlight one important takeaway that really resonated with me.
Okay, I'm all ears.
It's the reminder that learning new words is not just about, expanding your vocabulary.
Mm.
It's about expanding your horizons, your ability to engage with the world around you in deeper and more meaningful ways.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Right.
It's about unlocking new possibilities.
Exactly. And with that in mind, I'd love to hear from you, the listener.
Oh, yeah.
What word of the day would you choose, and what scenario would you create to practice using it?
Ooh, I love it.
Share your ideas in the comments below.
That's a great way to bring the listener into the conversation.
Right.
It's all about making vocabulary learning interactive and engaging.
Totally.
Okay.
Now let's kind of shift gears a little bit
Okay.
and explore another activity from the mini lesson.
All right.
Self-talk
Ah, yes, the art of talking to yourself.
in English.
In English.
It might sound a little strange at first,
Yeah.
but it's actually a brilliant way to practice.
It is.
Without any pressure or self-consciousness, you can do it anywhere, anytime.
I've been trying this out myself lately, and I found it surprisingly helpful. Yeah. It's like having this internal dialogue that helps to solidify those new words in my mind.
Okay, let's give it a try right now.
All right.
I'm going to try to incorporate a new word into my self-talk.
Okay.
How about this? I'm finding this deep dive into vocabulary learning to be quite enlightening. I'm curious to see what other strategies we'll uncover next.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
You seamlessly worked in a new word and made it sound totally natural.
Thanks. And what's even more fascinating?
What?
The fact that we're constantly learning and evolving,
Mm-hmm.
even as, seasoned podcast hosts.
So true. There's always something new to discover.
Right.
Even in a field we're already familiar with. It's like we're back to that first tip from the mini lesson,
Right.
choosing content that genuinely interests us.
And that's what keeps learning fresh and exciting.
Yeah,
When you're curious and engaged, your brain is just primed to absorb new information.
absolutely.
Speaking of curiosity, have you come across anything lately that's really sparked your interest? Maybe something completely outside the realm of language learning.
Well, I've been reading a lot about the latest developments in virtual reality technology.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, the potential applications in education, particularly language learning, are pretty mind-blowing.
Wow, that does sound fascinating. Can't imagine how immersive VR experiences could revolutionize the way we learn languages.
Right. The possibilities are pretty much endless. But you know what else I find amazing?
What's that?
The human brain's capacity for language learning. Its inherent ability to adapt and grow.
It is remarkable. We're wired for communication,
Yeah,
to connect with each other through words.
absolutely. And the more words we have at our disposal, the richer and more nuanced those connections can be. It's like having a wider palette of colors to paint with, or a more diverse set of instruments to compose music with.
Oh, I love those metaphors.
Right.
They perfectly capture the beauty and power of language.
And that brings us back to the core message of this deep dive.
Okay.
Listening new English words daily is not just about expanding your vocabulary.
Right.
It's about expanding your horizons, your ability to engage with the world around you in deeper, more meaningful ways.
It's about unlocking new possibilities, both personally and professionally.
Exactly.
So as you kind of embark on this vocabulary building journey,
Yeah.
remember this. Every new word you learn is a key. that unlocks a new door, a new perspective, a new connection.
Oh, I love that.
Right.
And who knows what amazing discoveries might be waiting for you on the other side.
This has been such an insightful deep dive so far. We started with a mini lesson on daily vocabulary learning, and now we're pondering the future of virtual reality.
I know.
And the incredible capabilities of the human brain.
It's amazing how one topic can lead to another.
It is.
You know, how interconnected knowledge truly is.
It reminds me of that famous saying, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
That is so true. And that realization is both humbling and exhilarating.
It is.
It fuels our curiosity.
Yeah.
And it drives us to keep learning, to keep exploring.
Which is exactly what we're here to do.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought-provoking question.
Oh, I love these final thoughts.
Right.
They always leave me with something to ponder long after the episode ends.
Me too.
Yeah.
Okay, here it is. We've talked a lot about the practical benefits of learning new words. But what about the emotional impact? How does learning a new word make you feel?
Ooh, that's such an insightful question.
Right.
It goes beyond just like the cognitive aspects of language, and it taps into the deeper, more personal side of learning.
Think about it. When you finally grasp the meaning of a word that's been eluding you.
Right.
Or when you use a newly learned word confidently in a conversation.
Yeah.
How does it make you feel?
Yeah. Do you feel a sense of accomplishment, of empowerment? Yeah. Maybe even a little thrill of excitement.
I do. It's like cracking a code or unlocking a secret.
Yeah.
And that feeling of mastery.
Yeah.
Of expanding your linguistic repertoire.
Yeah.
It can be incredibly motivating.
So true. So as you continue on your vocabulary journey, pay attention not just to the words themselves, but to the emotions they evoke. Let those positive feelings fuel your passion for language learning.
I love that. And remember, every new word you learn is a victory.
It is.
A testament to your ability to grow and evolve.
Beautifully said.
We'll be back soon with part 2 of our deep dive into learning English words daily.
Can't wait.
Until then, happy learning.
And may your vocabulary be ever expanding.
See you soon.
Bye. That was such a great question to end on.
Yeah.
I love how you brought the emotional aspect of language learning into the mix.
It's so true, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about adding words to like a mental list or whatever.
Yeah.
It's about how those words make us feel, you know? More confident, more connected.
Yeah.
More capable of expressing ourselves.
Exactly.
Like every new word adds another brushstroke to the canvas of our communication.
Ooh, I like that.
Okay, enough with the artsy metaphors for now.
Okay.
Remember all those practical activities from the mini lesson? I'm thinking it's time to try one out ourselves.
Okay.
Live and direct for our listeners' benefit.
Ooh, a live demo.
Yeah.
I'm always up for a challenge.
All right.
Which one are we thinking?
Let's revisit the word of the day role play.
Okay.
We already picked our word. Enlightening.
Yeah.
Inspired by that self-talk example we just did. Now let's see if we can weave it into like a spontaneous dialogue.
All right, game on. Let's set the scene. How about we pretend we just finished listening to a guest speaker at a conference?
Love it. Conferences are full of enlightening moments, or at least they're supposed to be.
Right.
Okay, so picture this. We're walking out of the auditorium, still buzzing from the talk.
Okay.
And you turn to me and say,
wow, that presentation on the future of renewable energy was so enlightening. I had no idea we were making such progress.
And I'd reply, I know, right? It was really enlightening to hear about those new solar panel technologies. It gives me hope for a more sustainable future.
Nailed it.
Ooh.
We managed to use enlightening in a natural, conversational way.
See? It wasn't even that hard.
Not at all.
You, listening right now, can do this too.
Yeah.
Pick a word, any word, and imagine a scenario where you might use it. The mini lesson makes a great point. You're much more likely to remember a word if you can connect it to a real-life situation.
Absolutely. The more you can make those connections, the more those new words will start to feel like your own.
Now, there's one more activity from the mini lesson we haven't tackled yet.
Oh, which one?
Self-talk.
Oh, right.
Remember, this is where you basically narrate your own life in English, sprinkling in those newly acquired words.
It might sound a little silly at first.
Yeah.
But honestly, who's judging? You're your own audience.
Exactly.
Plus, it's a fantastic way to practice without any pressure.
Okay, let's give it a go.
All right.
Imagine I'm making my morning coffee.
Okay.
I could say something like, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee is incredibly invigorating.
Yeah.
It's the perfect way to start a productive day.
See? Effortless.
Ha.
And you slipped in invigorating like a pro.
I try.
What's fascinating about this technique is that it forces you to think about how to use the word
Okay.
in a way that makes sense for you
Right.
in your daily routine.
It's like tailoring a vocabulary suit that fits perfectly.
Exactly. It's about making those words your own,
Right.
integrating them into the fabric of your daily life.
This deep dive has been so insightful so far.
Yes.
We've gone from practical strategies to hands-on activities and even touched upon like the emotional side of language learning.
Right.
But what really strikes me is this underlying theme of personalization.
Oh, interesting.
It's not about following a rigid set of rules or anything.
Yeah.
It's about finding what works for you, making those words come alive in your own unique way.
You hit the nail on the head. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to language learning.
No.
What matters most is finding methods that resonate with you, that keep you engaged and motivated.
And that's the beauty of this mini lesson, right?
Absolutely.
It's packed with ideas and activities,
Yeah.
but ultimately it empowers you to be the architect of your own vocabulary journey.
Absolutely. It's like a toolbox filled with all the tools you need to build your own linguistic masterpiece.
I love it.
Speaking of tools,
Yeah.
do you remember that point in the mini lesson about spaced repetition?
Oh, yeah.
I think it's worth revisiting
Okay.
because it's such a powerful technique.
Absolutely. For anyone just joining us, spaced repetition is this brilliant idea of reviewing material at increasing intervals. So you might review a new word after a day, then 3 days, then a week, and so on.
Right.
It's all about outsmarting your brain's tendency to forget things.
Exactly. And what's so cool is that there's a scientific basis for this.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Research has shown that spaced repetition actually helps to strengthen those neural pathways in your brain,
Wow.
making it much more likely that those new words will stick around for the long haul.
So it's like building a mental muscle memory
Yes.
for vocabulary.
And here's where technology can really come in handy.
Okay.
There are tons of apps out there that do the spacing for you.
Oh, nice.
So you don't have to keep track of all those review dates or anything.
That's awesome.
It's like having a personal vocabulary coach in your pocket.
Speaking of personal coaches,
Yeah.
have you ever tried working with a language tutor
Oh, yeah.
or joining a conversation group? The mini lesson didn't really go into those options in detail,
Right.
but I think they're worth mentioning.
Absolutely. Having a tutor or a language partner can provide that extra layer of accountability and personalized feedback.
It's like having a guide on your vocabulary trek.
Exactly. And conversation groups are fantastic for, putting those new words into practice in a real-world setting.
Right. It's one thing to recognize a word on a page or in a flashcard,
Yeah.
but it's a whole different ball game to be able to use it confidently in a conversation.
I agree.
So to our listener out there, if you're feeling stuck or want to take your vocabulary learning to the next level,
Yeah.
don't hesitate to explore those options.
Good advice.
There's a whole community of language learners out there ready to support and encourage you on your journey.
Now let's shift gears for a moment
Okay.
and talk about something that often gets overlooked in language learning.
What's that?
The importance of pronunciation.
Ah, yes, pronunciation. The art of making those sounds that twist and turn our tongues in ways we never imagined.
Haha, so true. And while the mini lesson didn't really delve too deeply into this aspect,
Right.
I think it's crucial for anyone who wants to be understood and to sound more fluent.
Absolutely. Think about it. You might have this vast vocabulary,
Yeah.
but if your pronunciation is off, it can create a communication barrier.
Exactly. It's like having a beautiful message written on a piece of paper,
Right.
but then crumpling it up before you hand it to someone.
Oh, no.
The message is there,
Yeah.
but it's difficult to decipher.
So what are some tips for improving pronunciation? What worked for you on your language learning journey?
One thing that really helped me was listening intently to native speakers.
Okay.
I would pay close attention to how they formed sounds, the rhythm and intonation of their speech.
It's like training your ears.
Yeah.
to pick up those subtle nuances.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's practice, practice, practice.
Right.
I would spend hours repeating words and phrases, trying to mimic those native speaker sounds as closely as possible.
It's like fine-tuning a musical instrument, getting those notes to ring out clearly and accurately.
And don't be afraid to use resources, too, like online dictionaries and pronunciation guides. They can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
Especially for those tricky sounds that just don't exist in your native language.
And remember, there are so many different accents and dialects out there.
That's true.
Don't feel pressured to sound exactly like one particular speaker.
Right.
The goal is to be clear and understandable while still embracing your own unique voice.
Speaking of unique voices,
Yeah.
have you noticed how our own voices have evolved over time
Interesting.
as we've immersed ourselves in different languages and cultures?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
It's like our voices become a tapestry,
Ooh.
woven with threads of all the languages we've encountered.
Wow, I love that.
And that's what makes language learning so enriching. It's not just about acquiring new words.
Right.
It's about expanding our understanding of the world
Yeah.
and of ourselves.
I love that image.
Yeah.
Our voices as linguistic tapestries, reflecting our unique journeys and experiences. And just like tapestries, they continue to evolve and grow
I do.
as we learn and explore.
So to our listener out there, as you continue on your vocabulary adventure,
Yeah.
don't be afraid to embrace the journey, the challenges, and the triumphs.
Right.
Allow yourself to be transformed by the power of language.
Remember, every new word you learn is a step toward fluency,
It is.
a brushstroke on your linguistic canvas,
Ooh, another one.
a thread in your ever-evolving tapestry of voices.
This deep dive has taken us on quite a journey so far.
It has.
From practical tips to thought-provoking questions to a celebration of the transformative power of language.
And we're not done yet. Stay tuned for the final part of our deep dive.
Yes.
Where we'll explore even more insights from the mini lesson and leave you with some final words of wisdom to carry with you on your vocabulary quest. Welcome back to our deep dive into learning English words daily. I feel like we've already covered so much ground. From those like practical sticky note strategies to the idea of our voices as like ever-evolving tapestries
Just love that metaphor.
woven with the threads of different languages.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It has.
And yet there's still so much to explore.
Right.
What I love about this mini lesson is that it just packs in so much valuable information, but it still feels manageable, you know?
Right. It's like they distilled all the best advice on vocabulary learning into like this potent shot of knowledge.
It is.
And speaking of potency,
Yeah.
let's revisit that concept of consistency, which the mini lesson really emphasizes.
Ah, yes, consistency. The secret ingredient to success in pretty much any endeavor, language learning included.
For sure.
It's so tempting to want to cram a ton of new words all at once, but that often leads to like overwhelm and frustration.
It's like trying to eat a whole birthday cake in one sitting. You might get a sugar rush initially, but you'll probably end up with a stomach ache and no real enjoyment of the cake itself.
That's such a good analogy. It's much better to savor the slices of vocabulary knowledge one at a time, allowing them to digest and become part of your, long-term linguistic repertoire.
I like that. Yeah, so it's not about intensity.
Right.
It's more about creating a sustainable habit.
Exactly.
And that's where those 20-minute daily chunks that the mini lesson advocates for really shine.
Yeah.
It feels doable, even on the busiest of days.
It does.
Exactly. It's about weaving vocabulary learning into the fabric of your life, making it as routine as like brushing your teeth or checking your email.
I like that.
And that's where those practical activities we've been discussing come into play. You know, they make it fun and engaging, almost like a game.
Totally.
From those playful sticky notes to those spontaneous self-talk moments, it's about finding what clicks for you.
Yeah.
What keeps those vocabulary gears turning.
And don't underestimate the power of simply noticing new words in the wild. Whether you're reading a news article or watching a movie or eavesdropping on a conversation. Ooh, sneaky.
Don't tell anyone I said that.
Your secret's safe with me.
Good.
But yeah, be on the lookout for those unfamiliar words.
It's like turning the world into your own personal vocabulary playground.
I love that.
And once you've spotted a new word, don't just let it fly by.
Yeah.
Take a moment to jot it down, look it up, try to use it in a sentence.
Okay.
The more you interact with those words, the more likely they are to stick.
It's like making a new friend.
Right.
The more you get to know them, the more they become a part of your life.
You know, it's interesting how we often approach language learning with this sense of urgency. Like we need to conquer it as quickly as possible.
Right.
But what if we shifted our perspective a little bit
Okay.
and viewed it as an ongoing journey,
Yeah.
a lifelong exploration of the beauty and complexity of language?
That's such a powerful reframing.
It is, right.
It takes the pressure off.
And allows us to just embrace the process, the ups and downs, the aha moments,
Right.
and the times when we stumble.
And through it all, we're learning, we're growing,
Yeah.
we're expanding our horizons. It's like we're adding new colors to our linguistic palette, new instruments to our symphony of communication.
I love that imagery.
Yeah.
It reminds us that language learning is not just about practicality.
Right.
It's about creativity, expression, connection.
And those are things worth savoring, don't you think?
Absolutely. So, to our listener out there, as you continue on your vocabulary quest, remember to enjoy the ride, embrace the challenges, celebrate the victories,
And never stop exploring the wonders of language.
and remember, every new word you learn is a gift,
It is.
a treasure that will enrich your life in countless ways.
This deep dive has been such a rewarding experience, exploring all these practical strategies and insightful tips for learning English words daily.
It has.
It's been a pleasure sharing this journey with you.
And with you, our wonderful listener. We hope you've gleaned some valuable insights from this deep dive and feel inspired to embark on your own vocabulary adventure.
Until next time, happy learning.
And may your vocabulary be ever expanding. Hey everyone, welcome back. Have you ever been in a conversation where you completely disagree with someone, but you don't want to, cause a scene?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Today we're going to deep dive into the art of agreeing and disagreeing politely in English.
Nice.
Our source material is this really cool script for an instructional video.
Okay, cool.
And it's full of useful tips and tricks, whether you're, learning English or you've been speaking it your whole life.
It's interesting, right? Because even as a native speaker, sometimes those conversations can get really tricky.
Yeah, totally. I mean, how many times have you wanted to just blurt out, "You're wrong," but you can't?
All the time. But yeah, this script emphasizes how direct disagreement can come across as rude in English-speaking cultures.
It's all about saving face and being respectful, right?
Exactly.
So how do we do that? How do we disagree without, causing a diplomatic incident?
Well, the script dives into a whole bunch of phrases and strategies.
Okay.
But what I think is most interesting is the psychology behind them.
Ooh, tell me more. So, for example, when it comes to agreeing politely, there's actually a lot of nuance.
Nuance, really. I just say, yeah, I agree.
Right. But sometimes you want to express really strong agreement. Let's say you're brainstorming with colleagues and you want to build on an idea.
Okay, yeah.
So the script gives examples I couldn't agree more. Or, absolutely, that's a fantastic idea.
Oh, I see.
It's like adding fuel to the fire.
Yeah, totally.
But then there are times when you might not be fully on board with an idea, but you don't want to shut down the conversation either.
Right.
And that's where more reserved agreement phrases come in.
Like what? Give me an example.
Things like, "I see your point," or "That's an interesting perspective."
Okay.
You're acknowledging their viewpoint without necessarily, fully endorsing it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then there's this whole other category of agreement phrases that I think are super interesting.
Okay, what's that?
They're all about agreeing with addition. So it's like saying yes and.
Yes and. Oh, I get it. So you're adding your own perspective to the mix.
Exactly. You could say something like, "That's true, and I'd also add that." Or, "I agree, but have you considered?"
Oh, so it's collaborative.
Exactly.
Instead of just blindly agreeing or disagreeing.
It's about taking that initial idea
Right.
and building on it together.
I like that. It's very constructive.
Yeah. And it can be especially helpful in situations where you need to be, diplomatic,
Right.
but you still want to contribute your own thoughts.
Okay, so we've talked about the art of agreeing politely, but what about the elephant in the room?
Uh-oh, what that?
Disagreeing. How do we disagree politely without, starting an argument?
Yes. Well, the script breaks down several strategies for disagreeing politely.
Okay, cool.
And one of the most effective, I think, is the art of softening the blow.
Softening the blow, what does that mean?
It's all about using phrases that acknowledge the other person's perspective before presenting your own.
So instead of just blurting out, "You're wrong," you could say,
You could say something like, I understand your perspective, but,
Okay.
or I see where you're coming from, however. These phrases create a sense of empathy and respect
Gotcha.
before you introduce your differing viewpoint.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's like building a bridge instead of putting up a wall.
I like that analogy.
The script gives a great example.
Okay, what is it?
Imagine someone says, everyone should work at the office full time.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just saying, no way,
Yeah.
you could respond with, I understand your perspective, but some people thrive in a remote work environment and are actually more productive at home.
Ah, that's much better. It's more like a conversation starter
Exactly.
instead of just shutting down the conversation.
It's about inviting a deeper discussion.
I like that. And sometimes the best way to disagree politely is by asking questions, right?
Oh yeah, questions are powerful.
So instead of saying, that's ridiculous, you could say,
have you considered? Or what about?
oh, okay, so you're encouraging them to think about it from a different angle?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's say someone says, social media is just a time waster.
Okay, yeah, common complaint these days.
Instead of dismissing their opinion, you could ask, don't you think it can also be a powerful tool for connecting with people and building communities?
Oh, that's good. You're not saying they're wrong, but you're like nudging them to consider a different aspect of it.
Precisely. It's about turning a potential argument into a shared exploration of ideas.
And sometimes that involves suggesting an alternative viewpoint altogether, right?
Right.
So if someone says this movie was terrible, you could respond with,
You could say, that's an interesting point, but I thought the cinematography was breathtaking.
so you're acknowledging their opinion while offering a different perspective.
Exactly.
Like, we might not agree on the plot, but can we at least appreciate the visuals?
Right. It's about finding that common ground, even amidst different opinions.
So it's not just about being polite, it's about understanding like the deeper dynamics of human interaction.
I think so.
This is so fascinating.
It is right.
I feel like I'm already learning so much.
Yeah, me too. It's like we're building a toolbox for navigating those tricky conversational moments.
Speaking of tools, there's one more strategy the script highlights that I think is really interesting.
I get, what is it?
Remaining neutral.
Neutral. So like not taking sides.
Exactly. Sometimes the best approach is to simply acknowledge the validity of both perspectives
Oh, okay, I think.
without necessarily aligning yourself with either one.
That makes sense. But how do you do that without sounding like you're just, dodging the question?
Well, the script provides some helpful phrases like, I'm not sure I agree entirely, but, or that's a valid point, though, I'd argue.
So you're creating space for disagreement without getting overly emotional or taking a firm stance.
Precisely. If someone claims online learning is always better than in-person learning, you could respond with, that's a valid point, though. I'd argue that it depends on the individual and the subject matter.
Right. You're acknowledging their point, but you're also introducing the idea that there might be more to the story.
Yeah, it's a more nuanced approach, I think.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of politeness and some specific strategies for agreeing and disagreeing gracefully.
Right.
But even with all the right phrases, tone and delivery can make or break a conversation, right?
Oh, for sure.
So how do we strike that perfect balance between being assertive and being respectful?
Well, the script goes on to outline 5 key strategies for staying polite, no matter how heated the discussion might get.
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with those strategies.
Okay, so the first strategy is all about using positive language. Like instead of saying, you're wrong, which can be kind of confrontational.
Right, yeah, that's never good.
You could try something like, I have a slightly different perspective.
Yeah, I see, that's much softer.
It's about, presenting your viewpoint without like invalidating the other person's experience. And this actually ties into the next strategy, which is maintaining a calm tone of voice.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, have you ever noticed how when someone starts yelling, it just makes you want to yell back?
Totally.
It's like our instinct is to match their energy.
But yeah, if you can keep your voice calm, and even it can really help de-escalate the situation.
And even though this is an audio-only deep dive, the script also mentions the importance of body language, like making eye contact and keeping an open posture.
Right. Even if you're not face-to-face, like in a phone call or video chat, those nonverbal cues can still come through.
It's about conveying respect and a willingness to listen.
Exactly. But, sometimes I struggle with finding the right words to express disagreement without sounding too harsh.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Like, I don't want to be rude, but I also don't want to just back down from my position.
Totally. So what do we do? How do we find that balance?
Well, the script talks about using what they call hedging words.
Hedging words, what are those?
They're words like maybe, perhaps, and a little that can kind of soften your disagreement.
So instead of saying, I disagree with that idea.
Right, which can sound pretty strong.
You could say something like, I'm a little unsure about that idea.
Exactly. It conveys a similar message, but with less force.
So it's like taking the edge off a little bit.
Yeah. And it also makes you sound more open to considering other perspectives.
I like that. But why does that work? Like, what's the psychology behind it?
Well, hedging taps into this psychological principle called saving face.
Saving face.
Yeah, it's all about allowing the other person to, maintain their dignity and avoid feeling cornered.
I see.
By using those softer words, you're basically saying, hey, I respect your opinion, even if I don't fully agree with it.
So it's not just about being polite. It's about understanding the social dynamics of the situation.
Exactly. And that can make a huge difference in how your message is received.
That's really interesting. I'm definitely going to try incorporating more hedging words into my conversations.
I think it's a really useful technique. And speaking of useful techniques, the script also emphasizes the importance of acknowledging the other person's point before disagreeing.
Oh, yeah, that's so important. It shows that you're actually listening and that you respect their opinion even if you don't share it.
Right. It's about validating their perspective before you introduce your own.
So you could say something like, so you're saying that.
Exactly. Or, if I understand correctly, your view is...
It's like you're building a bridge of understanding before you venture into potentially different territory.
Right. And remember, validating someone's perspective doesn't mean that you agree with them.
Right, of course.
It just means that you acknowledge their feelings and understand their point of view.
Yeah, that's a really important distinction.
And that can go a long way in creating a more, open and productive conversation.
Okay, so we've talked about softening the blow, using hedging words, and acknowledging the other person's point.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
Well, the last strategy the script mentions is to end on a positive note, even if you haven't, reached complete agreement.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, you don't want to just storm off in a huff.
Right. It's about leaving the door open for further discussion and maintaining a sense of goodwill.
So how do we do that? What are some good phrases to use?
You can say something like, we might have different opinions on this, but I appreciate you sharing your thoughts with me.
Oh, that's nice.
Or, it's been great discussing this with you, even though we don't see eye to eye on everything.
Yeah, I like that. It keeps the conversation from ending on a sour note.
It's about preserving the relationship, even in the midst of differing viewpoints.
Because ultimately, that's what matters most, right?
Exactly. Relationships are more important than always being right.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but how do we put all of this into practice?
Well, that's where the rubber meets the road.
Haha, I love that saying.
The script actually provides some helpful practice scenarios
Oh, cool.
that allow you to, apply these techniques in various situations.
So it's like a chance to test drive all these strategies before you hit the real world.
Exactly. The scenarios cover a variety of situations, ranging from casual conversations with friends to more formal settings like meetings.
Okay, let's try one. Let's say my colleague says, I think we should prioritize work-life balance to improve employee satisfaction and productivity. How would I respond using these techniques?
You could say something like, I couldn't agree more. Prioritizing work-life balance is crucial for both employee well-being and overall team performance.
Okay, so you're expressing strong agreement and reinforcing their point.
Exactly.
Now, what about a scenario where I need to disagree politely with a friend? Let's say my friend says, pineapple on pizza is the best thing ever invented.
Oh boy, a classic debate. In this case, remember the principle of saving face.
Right.
So instead of saying, that's disgusting,
Yeah.
you could use a hedging phrase like, I see what you're saying, but I'm not a huge fan of pineapple on pizza myself.
Yeah, that's much better. It's like you're acknowledging their opinion without making them feel bad.
Right. And you could even add a bit of humor to lighten the mood, like, maybe we should agree to disagree on this one. How about we order half and half?
I love that. It's like, we can still be friends even if we have different pizza preferences.
Exactly. But what about those trickier situations where you have to disagree with someone in like a professional setting?
Oh, yeah. Those can be tough.
Like, let's say you're in a meeting and someone suggests cutting costs by reducing employee training budgets.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Right, because you want to be respectful of their opinion, but you also want to advocate for what you believe is best for the company.
So how do you navigate that?
You could say something like, I understand the need to reduce costs, but I'm concerned that cutting training budgets could impact employee performance and morale in the long run.
Okay, so you're acknowledging their point about cost reduction, but you're also highlighting the potential downsides of cutting training.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, between being honest and being diplomatic.
And having a calm tone of voice like we talked about earlier.
I know, definitely.
This is all so helpful. I feel like I'm finally starting to understand the art of polite disagreement.
It's a skill that takes practice, but it's definitely worth it.
It's not about avoiding conflict altogether. It's about approaching it with grace and respect, even when things get a little heated.
Yeah, it's like we're learning a new dance.
Like that analogy.
Where we can move gracefully through these disagreements without, stepping on each other's toes.
Exactly. And this deep dive has given us so many moves to practice.
It really has.
It's not just about sounding polite, right?
Right.
It's about creating a space where everyone feels heard and respected, even when, opinions clash.
Well said. And what's really cool about these techniques?
What's that?
They can be applied in pretty much any situation.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, from casual conversations with friends to more formal settings like, business meetings or negotiations.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I've been thinking about how these techniques translate to the digital world,
Interesting.
Like, how do we apply these principles to online communication where it's so easy to misinterpret tone and intent?
That's a great question, and it's definitely something to be mindful of because tone and nuance can get lost in, text messages and emails and all that.
Yeah, totally. So what can we do about it?
Well, I think the first step is to be even more mindful of our language when we're communicating online.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like choosing our words carefully, avoiding sarcasm.
Right.
Because things can so easily be taken out of context.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe emojis can play a role too, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like a thoughtful emoji after a statement of disagreement could help to soften the blow.
Exactly. It's about using all the tools at our disposal to communicate effectively.
And remembering that even though we're interacting through a screen, there's still a real person on the other side.
Absolutely.
So as you navigate your next conversation, whether it's online or offline, remember the tools we've explored today.
Right.
Choose your words carefully, listen actively, and approach disagreements with, grace and a genuine desire to understand.
Because at the end of the day, it's not about winning or losing an argument.
Yeah, it's about connecting with each other
Right.
and building stronger relationships.
Exactly.
Well said. That's a great note to end on.
I think so too.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the art of agreeing and disagreeing politely in English.
It's been fun.
Until next time, happy conversing, everyone.